Alrighty, here we go. My name is Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I wrote this book called Ideal Man, Reviving Masculinity. It is available anywhere you can get books. It's at Walmart, for crying out loud. You can get it at on Amazon. You can get it. You can Google it and find it there. $21, small price to pay. I do a lot of work and a lot of research, and there's a ton of it in the book. So please jump out there and grab it. I got to have a great conversation with a guy called Simon Smart, and he caught my attention because he does a lot of work and research on rites of passage. And that's what caught my attention from him. He's a sharp guy, well-read, well-studied, had some great ideas about how to transition into manhood, and we agreed that it's an important thing that needs to happen. Without it, it's just one more thing that would help men be better at being men if there were actually a formal thing where you go from boyhood to manhood. Anyway, awesome conversation. I was recording at my cabin, so I apologize for the less than stellar audio and video, but you get the gist. You can hear everything fine. You can see everything fine. It just isn't glorious like this microphone is here. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy, and I hope this conversation helps you in some way to get your shit together. That's cool. So, man, we were talking about rites of passage, and I was going through your Instagram page, and I feel like we're in lockstep on this. I watch you and the videos that you have with your son, and just the things that you say, and we're on the same page. So I think we can agree that, I don't know, I'm just going to tell you my perspective on it, that we're sadly lacking that rite of passage as a way for, one of your videos, you talk about the 3 phases of a man's life, and the first phase is childhood, and then the second phase is to be a man, and you've got to kill off that child part of you needs to die, at least a big part of it, in order to be productive as a man. And we agree that needs to happen. I'm a proponent of that can't just be a thing that happens on its own. I believe that elders, role models, a lot of pieces need to be in place for that to happen. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no one ever initiated themselves, right? So
That's right.
It certainly takes a community. The hardest thing now is the communities are gone. So we have a lot of guys who want to make that step out of childhood into manhood in a emotional, psychological, spiritual way, and there is no community, or there's very little community to give them that. I was very lucky when I was in my early 20s. I left Scotland, threw away everything I had, and decided to move to Japan to study martial arts and just generally get myself into some trouble, and had a good time out there.
You were how old? How old were you when you did that?
I graduated law school at 21, decided I had absolutely zero interest in following that path. I felt there was another path calling to me.
Sure.
I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to make some sacrifices to try to find it. So I left Scotland and I went to Japan. Ended up being in Japan for about 4 years, mostly just as an excuse to train martial arts. But the great community I found out there, a lot of amazing Japanese, but there's also a lot of very interesting Westerners who live in Japan, mostly to train. And a lot of the guys I was rolling with were either long-term martial artists. We had a bunch of military guys of various capacities, and we had some intel guys who I was buddies with as well. And long and the short of it, through those connections, I was introduced to some guys who were actually doing traditional manhood training. So it was a gentleman who had grown up on and around the Chiricahua Reservation here in Arizona. And there was an old man who trained him in a lot of the concepts. He didn't do the full traditional training, but he was given a lot of the concepts and trained a lot of the concepts. And he was passing that on to some of us. So I found myself in a position where I was 21 going on 22, and I was a good fighter and I could handle myself. But there was this really fundamental issue that was eating at me. And it was that I had grown to physical adulthood and I still felt like a fucking boy inside. There'd been nothing had changed. There's some legal changes. I could do things, buy things, make my own decisions, enter contract, but I felt like a fucking boy inside, a boy in a man's body.
Sure.
and it bugged me because I knew that there was more available. And so I was introduced to these guys, and through a series of introductions, I was able to start some traditional-ish manhood training, which lasted for in that phase about 3 years. But in the first year, I did go through training and learn some concepts and go through a traditional rite of passage, which involved some pain and some difficulty and some time on my own in the wilderness. And
which, that's actually historically most rites of passage through native cultures involves that isolation.
yeah, so I did listen to your previous podcast on rites of passage,
thanks,
and you did a really great job. Really, really liked it.
Thanks, man.
Here's where I orientate from these days. When I first got into this stuff in the early 2000s, there was very little society-wide conversation about the lack of manhood, the lack of clearly defined roles in society. We were starting back then to talk about the crisis of eternal boyhood and what that was going to do to our culture. But no one was really talking about it. And now I'm really happy to see that we're in a world where there are podcasts and YouTube channels and people are having these conversations over a beer on a Friday night. Why they're no men? Yep. I know the ladies are.
They definitely are.
They definitely are. Sure. They were having it 20, 30 years ago. When I was a kid, I remember watching MTV. I was living in Asia at the time, and they started talking about this concept of being a 90s man. And being a 90s man was being in touch with your feelings and more feminized. So this conversation that men should act a bit more like women was going back 30 years. And at the same time,
that was what everybody said. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. But at the same time, women started to complain, where are the men? So somehow no one put these two things together. A few of us did. But my point is, we're now in a world where people are more and more aware of the problem, the gravity of the problem, and the direction that perhaps it's leading us in. But what I'm not seeing is a ton of answers. And even around the masculinity conversation, I'm seeing a lot of vague concepts of get tough, get some discomfort, man up, all these things. But I don't see a lot of structure or blueprints or frameworks being put around it. And the real challenge for us is, if we're trying to learn something or build something, you're in the contracting world, right? You try to build a house without a blueprint. There's some rooms you sleep in, and there's some rooms you live in, and there's a room where you get clean, and you got to get in and out, build it. What the fuck do I do now? What the fuck do I do now? And that's the current state. Yeah, that's the current state of the conversation around manhood, right? So I think for some of those of us who maybe are a little bit further down the path or have figured at least a little bit of it out, it's important for us to start actually figuring out how to build some frameworks so that people can come behind us and not take 20, 30, 40 fucking years to figure it out, but take 1 year, 2 years, and knock that out of your life so you can do the fun stuff.
So let's dig into it, man. What is it? I mean, I have some real specific opinions about how I think that would be structured. A real legit rite of passage to let a young man know, hey, the expectations of you are now different. What were the kind of the key pieces to your experience, and what would you put into play? I mean, what would you suggest if there were a brother-in-law of yours or a good friend, and he's got a 12-year-old son, and he's like, at some point I'm going to have to initiate this guy. How would you advise him?
Okay, it's a great question, and that's really what I wanted to talk about. So I appreciate it.
Good, man. Me too.
But let's back up one step, right?
Okay.
We talk a lot about the society-wide implications of a lack of masculinity, a lack of manhood, and lack of initiation. Society-level problems will never motivate one guy to go do something painful. Or
absolutely rarely. Correct. Yep.
Especially if he's already stuck in boyhood.
It might be a factor, but it won't be the main driving factor.
Yeah. And wanting to fix your culture and fix your community and fix your society, that's a mature masculine drive. Boys don't have it, so they don't fucking care. So let's talk about what are the.
Well, they're still very self-centered. Hey? I mean, and that's what it is to be young.
That's what it is to be young, right? That's what it is to have boyhood energy.
Yep.
One of the things that I've learned, and one of the things that I talk about a lot, is that there is a clear delineation between the way that a boy orientates himself in the world and the way that a man orientates himself in the world.
No
And
doubt.
let's circle back to that. But what happens when you try to go through life? Because life is fucking tough. Life is hard. It's chaos. It's confusing.
Yep.
Everyone has demands on you. It's really easy to fuck it up. What happens if you go into a man's world with boy energy? Here's what happens.
Okay.
It seems too big. We have no frameworks to deal with it. We end up getting overwhelmed because we don't have the frameworks. And we end up having to numb ourselves from our feelings about it and hide from the facts that we're not running this life right. How do we do that? Porn, video games,
alcohol,
drink, drugs, meaningless sex, all these things. So if you go into this very difficult world without the right frameworks, unless you're ahead of the curve and very, very smart, you're probably going to struggle, and you're probably going to run and hide, lose your kids, lose your marriage, lose yourself. Yeah. So there are some pretty serious consequences.
Unless you get lucky, there is a map that can be given to you, but if you don't have it, and you're just going to be lucky if you make it through that. So I agree with you. Yeah, it needs to be taught.
Yeah, if I'm lost, I got a 1 in 360 chance of walking in the right direction, right?
That's right, man. Yeah,
that's how it goes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what comes first, and then we'll talk about some of the elements that I think are essential to a true rite of passage, because we call it a rite of passage, R-I-T-E, right, because it's not just an experience. Okay. A lot of things that define us growing up right now. I know you mentioned high school graduation, getting laid for the first time, getting your first job, moving into your own home. Those are not right. Those are not rights.
Correct.
Camp can be. Making a kill can be if it's approached properly.
Sure. If it's set up right.
But a lot of these things are just experiences.
Those are not rights. Yeah.
There's nothing sacred. There's nothing profound to them, as there should be with a rite. So we're born. We're a baby, right? What are our roles and responsibilities as a baby? There really aren't any.
There are none.
You just kind of lay there. So I visualize that as a dot on a piece of paper. That's the size of your responsibility. You just exist. So then we get a little bit bigger. And one of the first traditional ceremonies, the first rite of passage I'm aware of in the Chiricahua tradition, is a first step ceremony. So when my son started to be able to walk, there's an old guy I know who lives out in the mountains about 80 miles that way. And he's been training for a long time. And him and I and his mother at the time, we took him and we blessed him, and we rolled out a blanket, and he took a few steps to the east, a few steps to the south, a few steps to the west, and a few steps to the north. Boom, there's your rite of passage. So what is that about? That's about two things. Number one, he was no longer horizontal, he was vertical, right? He was becoming upright, spiritually and physically upright. Second, he's walking in each direction because he's learning about the cycles of the world. And he's saying, here I am. I'm on the face of the earth. Here I am. I'm ready for what's next. So then he moves into boyhood, and the mission of boyhood.
So the key there, the key, I think, I mean, everything you said, completely agree. But you, as his father, are giving this experience meaning. You and this other gentleman are together making it very clear, and he might not, your son is so young, he's not going to remember it, but he's going to feel that the experience of you guys taking it seriously, and that this is an important piece of your growth. It's the people around you that you respect are telling you this is what is to be done. This is the next step for you, literally in this case. And there's value there. My guess is as you go forward, that'll be more and more important as the kids are able to absorb it. But sorry to cut you off. Just wanted to point out, jump into that piece. Go ahead.
Cut me off anytime. I cut other people off every day, 1,000 times a day.
I have to drive.
So that's the first thing he went through. And in traditional Western Christendom, that would be equivalent to baptism.
Sounds about right. Yeah, about
baptism. You're being claimed physically and spiritually into your community. So that was that. The next experience he'll have will be later this year. He'll turned 12. But when he stopped being a baby, he moved into some very basic responsibilities: stay alive, listen to his parents, do what he's told, and learn. And kids all do that naturally, but there's some value in us acknowledging that is the job of a child. Let me think about where I want to take this next.
Yeah. Good expectations are always, clear expectations are always good. He knows what's expected of him at that stage in his life. You've made that clear.
Yeah. And more importantly, I know what I expect of him.
Yep.
So if I'm going crazy and shouting at him or getting angry over shit that he shouldn't be expected to do, that's my problem. Right. Mm-hmm. So there we are. I'm gonna anchor something here, which I think is going to come into our conversation later. Cool. There are two motivational drivers for a young boy. One is toys, stuff, fun stuff to play with. That's what I wanted when I was a kid. I just wanted cool toys.
Yep. No doubt about it. Me too.
The other thing I wanted when I was a little boy was approval from my parents and other adults. So I lived for toys and approval. Remember that.
And praise, toys and praise. Yep. Toys
and praise. So later on, we get to physical adulthood. It depends on your society when that is. Post-puberty could be 15 through 20, right? Probably somewhere right in the middle of that. And I think this is going to be of value to you based on what I heard you talk about before, Travis. Let's talk about some of the elements that go into a true traditional rite of passage. And they all vary, but to me, these are some important elements. So number one is the actual rite of passage is a culmination of a training cycle. I don't just put you in the mountains and expect something to happen.
Yeah. So, you've got to have been building up to get to there your whole life, truly, your whole life.
Yep.
You have to have been learning, watching.
100%. So for my son, he's going to go through a little rite of passage when he's 12, because 12, he's moving from being a little boy into being a teenager. And so from 12 to 15, 16, now I'm training him in the beginnings of the rest of his life. So there's going to be some pre-training, and that would look like spending time with a father, spending time with an uncle, a godfather would be the traditional thing in the West, and other men who have some degree of mature masculine energy to them. Talking about what it means to be a man. What are your roles? What are your obligations? What does mature masculine energy and leadership and decision making actually look like? And what is it not? What is your, orientating the worldview from the childhood worldview to the male man worldview? That's
Which
a big
is
thing.
Absolutely a 180. The child view is, I'm looking at myself, and to be a man, it's to very much recognize that my responsibility is to others. Your thoughts?
You nailed it. So I said a boy, his worldview revolves around what? Toys and approval from others.
Yep.
Traditional masculine worldview is similar but different. The two things you look for, number one, is self-approval. Mm-hmm. So rather than requiring externally generated approval, I don't give a fuck about your approval. The only approval I really care about is mine, and to some degree, the approval of those I've brought into my circle.
And of course, in order to get to that point, you have to have spent some time very specifically thinking about what are the factors that I'm going to put into my syllabus, my list of rules that I have for myself. What are the things I will accept and what I will not? What are the things that I value and don't? And those are very much a result of you steal them from everybody around you, essentially. All right, my dad really valued these things, and so I'm going to absorb that. And there was this one thing he valued, I'm not really into that. And my uncle was really into these other things, and so I'm going to take that. And there's some things he liked that I wasn't into. But you create this definition of yourself by watching all those things happen around you. And once you've established that, then you can truly have that intrinsic approval, because you've got a list of rules that you can look at. All right, am I hitting the mark? Then you actually have a thing to. Does that make sense? Is to bounce your opinion of yourself off of.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. You grow into your manhood, and you're looking at, hey, what are my beliefs? What are my values? What's my code? What am I for? Yep. What will I fight for? What will I fight against? What will I die for? What fucking pisses me off, and I would like to stop it.
Exactly. That's good, man.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Right. So you move from approval of others to approval of self,
Self. Yep, I
and
agree.
limited approval of others.
Hmm.
And toys moves into mission.
Purpose.
So here's how I put it in a very succinct way. Boyhood energy is driven by desire. Mature masculine energy is driven by duty.
Yeah, I would call it responsibility, but it's the same thing. Yep.
Yeah. I like alliteration. So we'll do desire and
We'll
duty,
do
right?
desire and we'll do duty. Me too, man. You know, I used to be an
Also,
English teacher, so I love stuff like that.
yeah. Also, my son loves when I say duty.
It's a winner. It's a
It's
winner.
it's always a winner, right?
Sure.
So this is the first stage. Before we even get into any rite of passage, we've got to actually build out the framework of
Yep, no
what
doubt.
are you going to become? What does it mean? Otherwise, we have no meaning tied into our ceremony or our rite. So the second thing, which seems to be common, if not universal, is that there's always a guide or a sponsor or a benefactor. Usually it's not your father. Usually it's not your father. It can be a family member, but it's someone who, and this is important, right? Because what do we all do when we're 15 years old with our
We
fathers?
rebel our asses off from our parents. That's why I can't be a parent. You got to have that coach or that some kind of other hero in your life that, you know, really it's got the same set of values, but it isn't your dad. I mean, sometimes if you're lucky, if it's your old man, you'll end up coming back around to that. But I agree with you at 15, 16, 17. And, you know, as a teacher, I was a high school teacher, so I watched it all the time and I got to be that guy for a lot of these young men. You know, I was a
Yep.
football coach and I could, you know, I was that role model. So I knew that they were looking at me and going, all right, this is what my dad taught me. Am I going to get the same thing from this coach or aren't I? You know what I mean? Like, I agree. I very much agree. It usually isn't your dad. You've got to have that other outside force for sure.
So, because I'm selfish, one of the reasons that I like to train other guys is so there are other guys, if something happens to me, to train my son.
That's good shit, man. Because you can
Redundancy,
teach them how
right?
you do it, and then that knowledge isn't lost, and it's there for your son too.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
He's nearly
sense.
12 here, coming 15, 16. I may be gone.
Maybe.
So there better be some redundancy in my community who can train him, right?
That's well said,
So
man. Redundancy in my community.
yeah, that's part of masculine energy, right? My duties
Yep.
need to be met even if I'm dead.
Uh-huh.
So we got a sponsor. And actually, this is a great point to actually talk about this. The ancient peoples who created these rites of passages that we have in our kind of genetic memory of our species, they didn't just sit around smoking a plant and be like, fuck, let's do this, right? There was a reason they did it. And what I believe the reason they did it is this. They observed psychobiological spiritual changes in boys. And without frame and structure, those turn into rebellion and anger and unchanneled, undirected violence, which are bad for
No
your
doubt.
tribe.
Yep.
So it
That
makes
definitely
sense that they would say, hey, let's frame this. Let's build some structure around this so that instead of it going wild and causing chaos that we old men then have to come in and deal with,
Yep.
let's channel that boyhood transformation energy into something valuable. And that's why I think so many separate cultures around the world, without chit-chatting with each other, figured out this is something that's important. So we got
it makes sense. I mean, probably was a reaction to something. They probably had everybody turning into jackasses. And so, well, we better do something here to channel these dudes, or the shit's going to go bad and it's going to stay going bad. We've seen how it, you see, like it probably was a reaction to things going poorly. You do it right and you teach the kids the right stuff and you get better results out of it. The community wins. So, yeah, I agree with you.
necessity is the mother of invention, right? They
It
didn't do
sure
it
as
for
hell
fun.
is, man.
They had a problem and they figured out how to solve it. We
Yep.
got rid of the solution. Guess what? Now we have a fucking problem.
Exactly right. Yep. And that's what we have now. Anyway, I don't want to jump ahead. Keep going.
That's okay. So we got pre-training. We got a guide or a sponsor. Next, and this is where I focus on the word right. It has to be done, I believe, with a degree of ceremony or ceremonial action towards the sacred. So if I go up a mountain, listening to music on my phone and being on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, I'm not treating it seriously. I'm not treating it right. And I'm certainly not allowing space for something new and miraculous to happen.
You're not in the
So,
moment. Sure.
So I would, there's typically fasting. I'll talk about mine a little bit. When I did my first quest I fasted for about 5 days. And then I did some ceremony. I spent some time in Sweat Lodge, touched in. And then in the middle of the night, I was driven up to the mountains and I ran up a mountain and found a place and I made a little circle. And I basically stayed in that circle for several days and nights.
This is after already fasting for 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did some purification. That's the fasting. I exerted some physical and spiritual power by climbing a mountain.
Yep.
I exhibited the beginnings of what we would translate as impeccability by finding the right place and sitting myself down properly in ceremony to do what I had to do. So there has to be this ceremonial approach because ceremony is the gateway to what Carlos Castaneda had a really great term for it. He called it non-ordinary reality.
What's his name?
Carlos Castaneda. There's a lot of controversy about him. He wrote a number of books back in the 60s and 70s about Peyote, and Don Juan was his teacher in the books. It looks like Don Juan was probably an amalgamation of a number of different people. But nonetheless, they're an interesting read, and there's some value in them if you have the skills to be able to parse out what's valuable and what's not. You could read his books and just say, hey, taking peyote is fucking cool. Let's go do that. But he talks a lot about, when we're driving our cars, sitting at our desks, talking on a phone, whatever. That's ordinary reality, right? There's nothing different. Non-ordinary reality would involve some altered states, perhaps a deeper, more profound connection with nature or with people or with the non-physical, the spirit world. So we want to have some ceremony to start to move ourselves into this non-ordinary reality. And if you want to look at it from a Western sense, deep psycho-spiritual change doesn't happen in ordinary reality. It happens in altered states. So we want to get there so that we can get this change that has to happen. That's the third thing I think is important, or the third and the fourth. The fifth, there has to be some sort of physical risk, not necessarily risk of death. We don't have to go kill the lion with our bare hands or a spear or whatever, right? But there should be some physical risk. If you go out for several nights here in Arizona, there's some challenge. I did one search and rescue. We called it off in the end, but we had to do one search and rescue years ago for a kid that went up a mountain and came back down the wrong side and couldn't find him for a while. So there has to be a little bit of risk. It has to be well managed, but if there's no risk of injury or death, why take it seriously?
Well, I also like that for the aspect of, again, building that idea of yourself. And I think there's a lot to be said for in manhood. You opened up by saying that life is tough, life is difficult. There's a lot of these things. And you have to have some belief in yourself, ultimately, that you have the ability to deal with those difficulties. And creating physical difficulty at the point of a rite of passage makes perfect sense. It's symbolic of the difficulties you'll see in your adult life. And it's just another challenge that you, as a young man, that you can throw into your file of, all right, this is shit I got through, so I know I can get through the next thing because I got through this other shit. So yeah, I agree with you. The physical risk, and I think risk taking is natural for men anyway. The more that you can do, generally, the better you do in finance, business, whatever it is that you choose to do. Being ready to jump into that is key. So yeah, I agree with the risk thing.
100%. I know we all love it too, right? It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel accomplished.
Yeah, it's good shit.
Yeah, having a little high five with death and coming past it is one of the most enlivening moments you can have.
Invigorating.
And that's why one of the most I don't know if it's talked about in this way, but you talk to some real combat vets. That was a major rite of passage for them, right? There's some risk. Sure, there was some pre-training. It was definitely non-ordinary reality.
And you had
brotherhood, challenge, all those things. So a lot of combat vets, that's why I believe a lot of them come back with a real level of maturity. Sometimes the darkness can be a problem for them, but those are usually some solid fucking guys. So yeah, I agree. We got to have some danger, and then we got to have some separation from society. You can't do this in your bedroom. You can't do this sitting at the breakfast table with your mother, and especially there needs to be it would be great. It's not necessary, but it'd be great if there was some kind of ceremonial goodbye from family and community,
and or a ceremonial re-welcoming.
That's the other side of it. Yep.
We expect we expect different things from you. And I agree, man, getting apart from everybody in your life is extremely important, if for no other reason than, peer pressure is a motherfucker, especially at that young age. And second, it's just the idea that, like the Jordan Peterson lobster thing, where you go to make a change and make yourself better, other people just naturally they pull you back down. I mean, that's just human nature. I've watched people do that to me. I've watched people do that to other people in my life. And I mean, I'm not trying to talk shit, but people do that. So you've got to be away from them to make that transition. You do. I agree.
Let's talk shit. I'm happy to.
Haters suck, dude. I did an episode of haters.
What do you think the tone of that farewell should be?
I would hope that the tone that I get from the people, as I'm just trying to put myself in that position, is we're proud of you and we're behind you. We support you. We know how fucking hard this is going to be. We raised you for this. You're ready. Go get them. But I want to see a little fear on their faces. I want to see from them, fuck, I hope he makes it. You know what I mean? I want to see that. I think that's going to add sauce to it. It's going to add sauce to my experience of this is a big deal. This is a big thing that's, my life is changing. That's what I would hope to see.
Yeah. That farewell, in my opinion, should be a little sorrowful and a little mournful and very somber and quiet. Good luck. We hope you come back. If you don't, we understand. And think of it from this point.
That like the younger you is dying at that point. Are you getting at that?
Yeah. I've had some great years, with you as my son and my little boy. And you're going to go do some hard shit. But when you leave, I'm doing some hard shit because I just lost my little boy. Especially difficult for the women because he is not coming back as their little boy. That door is closed forever.
That's good shit, man.
Failure or success, your child, your little boy is never coming back. He's dead. He's gone. And that's important so that later on he can be welcomed back as a new man.
Nice to meet you.
So there's this very somber farewell. And when you leave your community to go do this, you should be feeling that way as well. It's a heavy, serious thing to go do. So that happens. And then the boy goes off on his own and hopefully has some training to fall back on, which creates some kind of experience. This is something I don't talk about very often, but I will, because I think you'll like this. In my experience, there is a physical transformation into manhood, but there's also a non-physical transformation into manhood. And that's why it's traditionally translated as a vision quest, because you have a spiritual vision. I don't talk about the spiritual very much, but I do talk about the non-physical, because we obviously have a physical being and we have something past that. You don't have to be spiritual or believe in anything. Last week, I was in Sprouts, which is a really hippie health store we have here. And he's big enough now that I let him wander the aisles while I grab some stuff. And I always pretty much know where he is. I'm not sure if he knows where I am. So I felt like he'd lost me. And I came out of the end of an aisle and I looked all the way across the store. And he was standing with his feet together and his hands were kind of like by his sides, a little out a little bit, with his fingers, almost like jazz hands. His fingers are wiggling a little bit. Okay. And he's got his eyes closed.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me he was like in ready stance. Like I can go any angle I want to. Tell me more about that. I'm super excited.
So he's standing there at the end of the aisle, maybe 30 feet from me, eyes closed. I come around the aisle. I see him instantly. And as soon as I look at him, boom, he opens his eyes and smiles at me. And so I use that as a training opportunity. He said he was looking for me and he wanted to see if he could do magic. I mean, that's the language of a child around the spiritual experience.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
I didn't want to make me appear. He just wanted to find me. So I said, okay, how did you opened your eyes as soon as I came around the corner and looked at you immediately. It was perfect timing. So what was that? Did you feel me? Did you see me? Did you hear me? Did you smell me? I fucking hope not. Not from that distance. I mean, we'd both been training, but it wasn't that bad. So I asked him the question, how did you know to open your eyes and find me right then. And he said, I don't know. I just opened my eyes and I felt like you were there. So this is the beginning of a training cycle for him, right? He started to discover something on his own. And what he's discovered is there's something past the physical layer of us that he is able to tap into.
There's no doubt about that. I talk about your gut instinct all the time. And we have the ability to sense things that our cognitive brain can't make any sense of. And it's just human evolution. It makes sense that we'd be able to, especially family. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, I think it's real.
Yeah. So on a quest or in a rite of passage, you are supposed to not just experience something past your physical, but you're supposed to come back with non-physical power. That's the goal. Non-physical power is essential for a man to be a man physically and spiritually. When you have no non-physical power, you can still pray, but it's like trying to fuck with a limp dick.
It makes sense.
Right? Your prayer doesn't have a lot of power because you don't have a lot of power.
Right. Yeah, so, you're at your weakest. You're begging, essentially. I mean, I hate to boil prayer down for that.
Totally begging. So in traditional societies, having power in the non-physical might help you survive battle better. You might just have a little bit of luck that keeps you alive. Having a little bit of non-physical power as a hunter might mean no one else can find anything to eat. And you walk it in the forest and you take a nap and you wake up and there's a deer right there and you shoot it and you bring it home because you prayed for it and you asked for it. And it's not one of those things I don't believe that is 100% reliable, but are you stacking the odds a little bit more in your favor? I think so.
Sure.
That's
well, it isn't just asking for it. I don't think it's just manifesting it either. I think that you have to be sort of open to feeling it come to you. You got to have your ears open and your senses open to feel it coming. Open
ears, open eyes, open heart, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's another important part of a real traditional rite of passage into manhood. You have to have some spiritual power when you come back. And then you come back to your community and you're welcomed back as a man, a new man, like you're a fucking beginner, but your responsibilities and your role in society and how you're valued and how you're treated have changed. Here, I'll give you an example, right? If I ask a boy
before you do, my freaking Zoom is going to shut us down here. So I'm going to close it, re-invite you back in. I'll splice them together in the back end. I'll
stay right where I am. Okay, cool. So the next thing that happens is that after this experience, whatever it is, this new man comes back. And ideally, he's welcomed back differently, right? He's welcomed back as a man. He's welcomed back with his new responsibilities, and he's seen as a beginner man, but still a man.
And the expectations are different. You'd expect people to treat you a little differently. Not like you all have to treat me well now. Matter of fact, I think it'd be the opposite. We're expecting much more from you at this point. Would be the angle.
If I ask my son to do something and he fucks up, whose fault is that?
That's on you.
I didn't explain
That's on you right now. But once
he
gets older, once he gets older, it's on him.
Yeah, you're a man. You fuck up, dude. That's on you. Now, if I'm in some capacity as your leader or manager, it's still on me. But man to man, you fuck up, dude. You fucked up. Fucking fix it. So you're treated differently, with a lot more benefits too. Now, I'll tell you a personal story. After I went through a lot of my transformation, let me tell you this. I went up a mountain and I was very conscious, as I said earlier, that I felt emotionally, psychologically no different than when I was 14 or 15. I just knew more shit and I had bigger muscles. And I knew my way around a woman. That was about it. So when I came back down that mountain, I fundamentally felt different. And I do look back on my life as before and after that day. One of the early experiences I had when I was sitting up there in the dark, I start to remember my childhood very graphically, things I hadn't thought about since I was little. And then I remember like a series of movie scenes. My mind flicked through all these teachers that I had in school and sports coaches, and I was in the cadet force and I had coaches there. And I started to remember these teachers and their faces and some of the lessons I learned. And it gave me this weird opportunity to just kind of say, oh, thank you. I got that. I'm so glad that happened. And it was almost like there's this cliche, right? If you have a near-death experience and your life flashes before your eyes, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like a flash. It felt like it went on for a while as like a review of some of the things I learned in childhood. It was really profound. And I didn't aim for it to happen. It just spontaneously happened. So I had a number of experiences up there.
Yeah, reviewing for the test. I mean, the transition you went through was a test, and
100%,
you were
100%.
reviewing for,
Yeah,
you know,
and it was kind of reviewing my notes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like reviewing my notes right before the next chapter.
Yeah.
So I came down the mountain, and one of the fundamental problems that plagued me for years, and to some degree is still a challenge for me. My father didn't understand any of this. My father never went through any of this. And ideally, my father would have said goodbye to a boy. And when I came back, he would have treated me as a man. Still my father, but we're now two men in the same group. And my father was not capable of that. Not his fault at all. He was not given the opportunities that were given to me. But it became very difficult for us to relate for years because to some degree, I had more understanding of duties and roles than he did. Which made me fucking frustrated with him. That was something I had to work through for a long time, but
you know
made
what?
it just hard for him.
I feel like that's one of the. I say this to my friends. They all have kids who are they're all getting out of high school and things like that. And I tell them that the things that every parent fucks up their kid, and it's the first real adult gift you give them, and it's because they have to at some point the kid has to get through that dealing with, all right, I'm fucked up in this way and it's because of the way I was raised and I have to fix that in myself or change it. And the second step and the key is to go, okay, so yeah, my parents did it and I think they did it wrong, but I have to now look at them as just another adult like I am who just made that mistake. I realize they did it because they thought it was the right thing. It didn't end up being that way. So in the end, you get, all right, I get to go through my first difficulty as an adult. I fixed this thing that was part of my upbringing. And I'm going to use that as a tool to teach me how to see my parents differently, change my expectations of them, and start seeing them as another adult rather than as my parents that you have these perfectly high expectations for, and you just get all over them when they mess something up. I think that moment right there is key. If the kid's prepared for it, it can be the best thing in the world.
Yeah, 100%. And, in an ideal society, as some of us who've grown up now and are actually looking to the next generation, that's one of the hardest parts for both parents is that when this kid comes back, he's different. And you have to treat him differently, and you have to validate his experience, whether you understand it or not. And so there's also almost a getting to know this person for the first time again.
Yeah.
Like, who is he now?
I could see that.
What's he about now?
I think of my uncle who was a hippie, right? And my grandfather who was a World War II veteran, and my uncle coming back from college and having these hippie ideals and trying to reconnect. Now I've had some adult experiences and I want to connect with my dad, but he can't see that shit because all he sees is, why didn't you go to fight in Vietnam? And so then you get that conflict. Very difficult to get past some dynamics.
Well, the thing that healed me the most with my father was me becoming a father. Because because suddenly I start to look back on choices he made and the way he was through my eyes as a father. And this is more of the maturation of being a man, right? Being a young man in his 20s is one thing. Becoming a father is a significant enlarging of your circle of duties and responsibilities. It also comes with more power. I believe most guys I've known who've been good, solid centered men have been extremely worried about finances before new babies come into the world. And almost every time money comes with a baby, promotions and opportunities. And it's this amazing thing where you take on more responsibility, but if you're humble and open, somehow the world comes in and supports you. It's like, if you're willing to do your job, you'll get help. If you're not willing to do your job, the world's going to come in and fuck up your shit. And that's maybe as it should be.
Indeed it is. I mean, I think that's natural selection, if nothing else. We
Hell
need more of
yes. we probably do. It depends on my mood, right? Sometimes I want a hell of a lot more of that. Sometimes I'm a
that.
little more compassionate. But
Sure.
so that's kind of my summary of what I believe are the components of building out a rite of passage. And every community, every family should build it differently. But I think you want to try to get some of those components in there for it to have maximum impact on the upbringing of that man.
According to their ideals, I agree. Each community, it should be different. I mean, you heard me say it in the podcast. You define your community as you will, and I think the smaller the better. A community can just be your family and loved ones. And well, as you're talking about the ceremony part, I wonder what I know that you didn't have this. You were on your own, and I suppose you'll be a proponent for that aspect. But I wonder if this on the ceremony part, if there are onlookers just for the ceremony part. You go through and do all the things that you did, but there's I think about like when I got into the Elks Club, like I had to learn and study and all these things. Then they walked me through a ceremony and lots of people there watching, including my sponsor, which again, I was just getting into a club. But I wonder the value of having important people there as you make a formal transition, like walking across the stage of graduation, just for example, something of that nature, where it's very clear to everyone how important it is that you go through this. That's why they're here watching you. That's why they're here supporting you. Is there any room for that? What are your thoughts if that becomes a piece of it? If I'm helping my son's 12-year-old come through this thing, and there's a piece of it where all of us men are there, whether we're sitting around a fire, whether we're whatever it is, your thoughts?
I hate arguing over the meanings of words. So hopefully listeners will forgive me for giving two words, maybe a more delineated definition than they have.
Sure.
I would separate ritual from ceremony.
Oh, okay. I know exactly what you're saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, a ritual to me has a lot of external social, there's probably observers, there's probably others involved, and it's something which is happening in a very predefined sequence. That's a ritual to me.
That's your tradition.
Ceremony is an internal experience of how you do something. So if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I've never experienced any kind of ceremonial consciousness before. How would I do that?" I'll give you a couple of examples of what I might say. I might say, go out in the middle of nowhere and take 4 rocks, right? Sit down on the ground and stack the rocks one on top of the other in the east. Take one, put it in the south. Take the second, put it in the south. Take the third, put it in the south. Take the fourth, put it in the south. You've now moved 4 rocks, and do that all the way around. Keep going around. Breathe, relax, make your eyes soft. Do it with reverence. Do it with focus. Make it until nothing else in the world exists but you and these rocks and the earth you're sitting on. Then you have a shot at maybe understanding how to do something with ceremony.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so in a rite of passage, and the word rite is closer related to ritual, right, than the ceremony, but that's just it was a French anthropologist that I believe came up with that phrase in the early 19th century, I think.
Rite of passage is only a couple hundred years old, really?
The phrase.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, there was an anthropologist, Ganup. He's a Frenchman, and he used it for the first time in French. Rites de Passage.
Well done. So obviously, you grew up in Europe. That was a great French accent, bro.
Thank you so much. Next time we will do the entire podcast for you in the Francais. Oui.
Filthy Americans.
You're going to get complaints from French listeners.
Yeah, probably. Well, I have a French last name, so they can pound sand.
So yeah, I think things should be done ceremonial. Martial arts, right? If you go to a traditional martial arts dojo, you typically at the beginning, you put your gi on, you put your belt on, and you kneel down in a row, facing the teacher and facing typically a shrine that's up on the wall. And you clap and bow in. And traditionally what that does is that opens ceremony. It separates training from the rest of the world. And then we'll train for an hour or 2 or 3. And then at the end, we'll sit down and we'll clap again. And that closes ceremony. So there's ceremony is a real interesting thing to study. And there's a lot of value just as an individual to, especially here in modern 2022 Western society where there's none of this, just being able to walk outside and do something with a little bit of reverence is an extremely powerful experience. And we talked at the beginning about learning to not give a fuck about others and living more in self-approval. I also believe it's important to have a relationship beyond yourself, creator, the universe, however you want to call that. I'm more worried about at the end of my life letting the big guy down than myself, but they kind of go together.
Upstream, that makes sense.
If you don't live in some ceremony once in a while, it's hard to really give any gravity to that experience. There's a lot of modern religions where people go to a religious event week after week for years without ever having any kind of ceremonial or profound spiritual experience.
Yeah, and the more that you do that, the more it becomes the same as having your iPod on when you climb the mountain. I mean, it's just a part of your normal rotation, and to not have that focus that you should have to make it make sense, it's just not there. So what's if you and I were to concoct right now with our reasonably progressed thoughts on this, a retroactive way for a man who never got this, who's still Peter Pan, who's still acting in that young, everything's about me, everything's about getting approval from people and buying more toys. What would be the retroactive thing? I mean, that's why I wrote my second book, was to hey, these are the things you're supposed to be doing as a man, and obviously your dad didn't teach you this shit. I mean, that was my whole thought behind writing this one, was, hey, you guys didn't get it. You didn't get the memo. Like, this is the shit you're supposed to be doing. It's obviously, it's not a rite of passage, but it's a start. It's at least a set of ideas. I mean, what would we do? I mean, if you and I were going to design that, I mean, where would you start? A guy's 30, he's been through a couple of failed relationships. He's got kids that he doesn't see, just didn't get his shit together. What do you do?
It's a great question. And there's always more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Course,
so
yeah.
the value to a society of a rite of passage is that it's clean and quick and it's done. If you don't have that, maybe you take the longer road, right? Which is you start reading some books, and you don't just read the words, you think about, how does this apply to me? You have to look at your world and say, I'm not fucking happy. I'm not fucking happy with me, who I am. And I'm very unhappy with the results I'm currently creating and manifesting in my life. And that's the hardest part, right? Because even as men, but especially as boys, what do we do? We fucking lie.
Blame other people for your shit. You're in this situation where your life isn't what you want it to be, and you're still blaming everybody else for it. You can't take accountability and go, yep, this is on me, as a man would, right? And I think that's key. If you don't own your own shit, if you're not accountable, it's hard. You're not going to start doing that reading and learning like guys like you and I do. I think I cut you off. I'm sorry, bud.
I'll be okay. You're right. You're right. We blame others, right? And a rite of passage does not solve that at all.
No, not at all. Okay? Not at all.
I'll circle back to that. But before you can blame anything on anyone else, there's something else that has to happen, right? You have to admit something's wrong.
There's a problem. Yeah.
And 90% of modern men are addicted to all the things we talked about earlier. They're broke. They're in broken relationships. They're raising kids that they have no direction for or hope for or even connection with. The whole thing is a fucking shit show, but they pretend it's okay. Because they don't want to admit to themselves or others that, oh, maybe I didn't learn enough or teach myself enough to do this. So the first thing is you have to deal with some facts. You have to actually look at the facts of your life and say, hey, this is not good enough for me. Now, then you can start blaming other people for, hey, I'll tell you a quick story, right? I'm a very hard worker. I'm a very ambitious guy. I like to be successful in whatever I try my hand at. For years though, let me preface this. Things like radical accountability and radical responsibility, I believe, are gateways to power over your life, because as soon as you blame someone else, you have no power. As soon as you
Talk
say
about it all
that's
the time.
on me, suddenly it
Exactly.
creates a potentiality and a possibility that I might have the power somewhere deep inside
To change it.
myself to actually change it. Right.
Yeah, dude, and
But
that's so core. Yeah, and people just don't want to do that. Nobody wants to look in the mirror. Go ahead.
yeah, so I knew that. I believed that. I acted on that. And I coached other people on that. And some days, still blame my ex wife. And some days, I blame my current girlfriend. And some days, I blame my son because it's really hard to homeschool a kid and run business meetings. And I'm currently raising a 9-month old Dutch Shepherd as a protection dog. It's like a Malinois.
Okay.
It's like Ferraris are cool, but not everyone should drive one, right? So
Okay.
they're high drive, high prey drive, aggressive dogs. It's a hell of a lot of work. I don't want him in his crate all day, but if I let him outside, he destroys everything. So I spent 2 days last week blaming my fucking dog for not hitting my income goal last month. I did.
Well, man,
Fucking
but
did.
you know what?
Right.
I'm not. I don't want to let you off the hook, but I'm gonna let you off the fucking hook. The difference between a man who's doing it right and one who isn't, you can think those thoughts, but my guess is you didn't fucking say, "Hey, damn it, dog, why can't you?" And you didn't go to your son and blame it. You didn't call your ex-wife and say, "Why can't you get your shit together?" You had those thoughts, but then you dismissed them and you carried on, and your actions were what they needed to be. That's my guess.
That's a great story. No,
It didn't happen that way. I gave you too much credit.
hey, listen. Thank you for the credit. Let's be
You're welcome,
real.
buddy.
I did say some choice words to my dog. I didn't say anything to my son, but
Well, he had it coming. He had it coming.
I told my dog that if he can't get his shit together, I'm gonna have to get rid of him. But
Sure.
guess what the truth is? If I can't get my shit together, I'm gonna have to get rid of him. So the
That's
difference to
exactly right.
me between boyhood energy and more mature masculine energy, it's not that you're just totally different and you get all this shit. The difference is instead of living in that forever, it lasted 2 days. And then I said, okay, let me write down what my goals are. What am I working on? And then I have to figure out, okay, how do I still do this? How do I still live my duties and manage the dog? And then I figured out, okay, if I do this, like I wasn't getting my workouts in, right? I like to work out for an hour. Okay. I can still work out. If I work out harder and faster, 25 minutes a day, I get it done. Okay. So I'm shortening my workouts. Meditations become harder with a dog in the house. So I got to change my meditation style so I can drop in faster. So I got to make these changes, right? I got to schedule my day a little bit differently. But so I figured it out. And that's the point. I caught myself in my bullshit and figured out how to make it work.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what I'm good at.
beat a dead horse, but your life's perfectly set up right now for the results you're getting. I mean, you're doing all the right shit to get exactly what you have right now. You want something different, you got to make some adjustments and shit. As we said earlier, life's fucking hard, man. Hard shit happens all the time. You threw some more responsibilities into your life with the dog and choosing to homeschool, and I'm sure you have lots of financial pursuits that you're into, professional pursuits. You picked all those. You've put all those into your backpack. So now it's on you to carry it. It's on your legs and your back to carry that shit around. And you realize, all right, I got to adjust the weight here and move some things around to make it more efficient. So you did. That's like being a man 101. I chose these responsibilities. I got to do the best I can with them. I'll find a way.
Yeah. I'll tell you a bit more about that. We have time. I see we're at the hour. You good to go?
Yeah, I got tons of time, man.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock here, so I don't have anything else going on. I'm good.
The clubs are just about to open. Come on.
Yeah, I'm ready, bud. Yeah, at 45 years old, nothing I like better than going to a fucking club. Man, I can't even. I'm ready to go to sleep before they even open. You know what I mean?
Well, how are you going to go meet the wrong women?
Oh shit, dude! You can find those online now, bud. It's easy.
So, I give you that story because I actually have a guy I'm working with who I'm going to call him next week because he's having the same problem in a different way. But let me frame it a little. There are 4 things I work on every day. That's all. Because I'm not a genius. I'm not super smart. I have 4 things I work on per day. The way that I teach this to my son is with 4 animals, and this will be maybe interesting. So
This is, man, I'm excited.
A lot of what I work on is based on the solar cross or the medicine wheel. It makes it simple for me. There's usually 4 directions and 4 angles and 4 pieces. So I have 4 animals for my son, right? Number one is the bear. The bear to me represents that grounded physicality. So for my son, when he's working on his bear goals, he's doing jujitsu. He's going for a run. He's learning. Right now, I'm teaching him kettlebell, right? So those are his bear related jobs. I got in trouble from my girlfriend this morning because I got him a new kettlebell and I have him do 100 kettlebell swings every morning. And I was outside working with a dog and he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, Dad, I did 31." So a year ago,
I know exactly what I would say.
A year ago, you may not be the asshole I am. Let's find out. A year ago, I'd have said, "Hey, buddy, great job. Go do a few more. I'm proud of you for doing 31. Well done." Because I was talking to a little boy. He's going to be 12. He's starting to transition. So I said, "Cool. Let me know when it's 100." Because when you come to me and tell me it's 31, what I hear is the job's not done. Yeah. And what I want in the men around me is when I tell you go do a job, tell me when it's done. Because in the middle, what you're telling me is it's not done. Yep. So my girlfriend overheard me. She has a different opinion. Okay, well, what would you say?
I would have said, "Is that enough for you? Do you think that's enough?" Start turning it back on him. I mean, and I'm not a parent, but I know I did that a lot as a high school teacher and a football coach. I'd be like, is that enough? Do you think that's enough? You know, let them, because kids are always harder on themselves than you are, believe it or not. I mean, that's always been my experience. Every time I take the captains off my football team and say, "All right, this is the bad thing that happened. What do you guys think we should do about it?" "Oh, and they're hard as hell on each other. Oh, I think we should suspend this kid, and this kid should drop his jersey right now." Like, they're hard as hell on each other. You know what I mean? And, you know, getting them to develop that own personal voice. I don't know. That's an opportunity.
The way that I see it, as I said earlier, is boys are motivated by toys and external approval. So he used to get approval for doing some of his job. Now he'll still get approval, but the job's got to be done. That's very specific, so that when his need for external approval finally moves into a need for internal self-approval, he won't give himself approval when he's done 31 of 100. He'll give himself approval when the job's done. That's the pattern I'm going to see.
Is going to become his conscience, right? So that the most positive idea from a male becomes the voice in the back of his head. You'll be there if you are dead in the next couple of years, and let's hope that doesn't happen. He already has your voice in his head. He's already got that there, and he'll seek things that echo that same voice if you've done it right, which I'm sure you have.
Dude, you nailed it. If something happens to me and I'm dead, maybe I've made some investments already. 100%. So those are his bear goals, right? Next, we have the eagle, which represents being able to fly high above the spiritual, above the physical realm in the spirit world. So that's sitting and learning to breathe for him, right? For me, it's maybe some more advanced meditation or other work. So that's the eagle, bear, eagle. Then we have the wolf. The wolf represents, in the animals that I made up, represents community, tribe, bonds, the interweaving of obligations, which in Japanese would be called giri. In Chiricahua, that would be stake. So there's this interweaving of I owe you for this and you owe me for this, but go pay this guy back because I owe him for that, right? That's community, tribe relationships. And then,
or as my dad would say, pebbles in a pond. You can't just drop that thing in there and have it be. It affects lots of other things, right?
Yeah.
Everything you do affects lots of other people, not
your place in the web of life. Absolutely. And the last animal is the buffalo. I use the buffalo to represent provisioning, which means in the modern world, make some fucking money, right?
Okay,
so he and I are slowly working on a pressure washing business for him. We're not very far along. He just thought of it about a month ago. We're doing some business training exercises where he's learning, hey, what would it take? One of my goals for him by the time he leaves my care is that he can walk up to a girl in a coffee shop and get her phone number. He can sell a product door to door, and he can win a fight. If I get those things down, I'm going to be fairly happy by the time he's 17, 18.
Fine. Yeah, dude, that idea of, I love the starting the business mentality and building up, resources, and a power washer company is a great way to do it. That's a thing that I do for my business too. I mean, power washing is a big part of what we do, and
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
the easiest money ever. Spend $500, get a power washer, throw it in the bed of your truck, and you can make insane cash. Like I charge $250 just to take it off the truck. You know what I mean? Because it's a machine. You don't. Oh, you know what? You don't want to pay the $250. You go buy a power washer for $500 and do it yourself. They always pay the money. You know what I
I'll
mean?
have
Like,
I'll have to have him call you. But yeah, we're talking about, extremely high margin, right?
yeah,
Basic
for
marketing
sure.
skills. And what I really like is, hey, go knock on that door. They have a dirty yard.
Yep.
So I
Yeah,
want to
my
get to a
tools are
point
gonna help
where,
you.
but in a year, I want to spend, a couple of Saturdays a month. You can go make some money.
Yeah, and you should be able to. Well done on that one. So I like the four animals, man. That's great stuff. I wonder if, man, I don't think a single one of those ideas isn't still true in manhood. I always thought that about football. That's why I liked it. I still like it as a coach. Is everything I teach them in football echoes into life. Everything I teach them in football works for being a man. And those four things that you said, I mean, those are good rules for a 40-year-old. You know what I mean? Those are good things to be working on every day for a 40-year-old guy.
I call it the four foundations of masculine achievement. If you're extremely fit and healthy and you have vitality in your body
Mm-hmm.
and you're confident because of it, if you have that going on,
Mm-hmm.
and you're spiritually connected and aligned with your values and
Mm-hmm.
your creator, and because of that, you also have powerful presence when you walk into a room,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a kick-ass relationship with your partner, great sex, great intimacy, great communication. You're
Mm-hmm.
raising your kids right. You have a good relationship with everyone else around you, and you're nurturing and coaching and doing all those things. If you got those three down and you're making really good money because you understand the principles of business and colliding with other people and selling and all those
Sales,
things.
yeah.
If you have all four of those dialed in, life will still throw you chaos and bad things will still happen, but life's going to be fairly fucking good at that point.
Yeah. You might have one step back, but you're probably taking 4 or 5 steps forward at a time. And if you've got those pieces in place, there's no doubt about it. And it's sad how few people really do. I mean, almost everybody I know, and I know a lot of great men who might have 1 or 2 of those pieces in place, and the other ones are in shambles. And it's to be able to learn to balance all 4, it's huge.
Yeah, I also see them as gifts. It's another way that I look at it. This is more of to me personally, this is more of a sacred duty. I didn't make my physical body; it was given to me, so it's mandatory that I take good care of it. I wasn't
Yep.
given my spirit, my soul. I don't remember giving it to myself, so I better take good care of it. It's a loaner, right?
Yep.
I wasn't given my ability to my ability to provide is something that was inherent in me as a human being with agency and intelligence and skills. I should polish it every day. And likewise, my ability to connect with others is a gift. So those are the 4 gifts for me. And I think it's a responsibility just to every day give each one a little bit of polish. And equally, I think you'll understand this. The number of guys that I've worked with or coached who have built really, really amazing businesses, high income, high revenue, but on that journey, they're killing their body,
Yeah, no
and
shit,
they
man.
end
So
up
common.
wealthy, and then they got to give 2/3 of it away in the divorce, which is the price of their success. Well, that's not
Yeah.
success.
Yeah.
So I don't believe it is a long-term strategy to focus only on 1 or 2, because
Yeah.
the other ones somehow sneak in the back door and blow up your success every single time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I made physical fitness chapter 1 in my new book, and yeah, I agree with you that stuff you got to have them all. You got to be, I'm sure you're familiar with Jack Donovan. He has this quote I think I put it in both my books now, that there's a difference between being a good man and being good at being a man. And it's those things you're talking about. You didn't decide to be, however tall guy you are. You just happen to be a man. That's how it came out. You didn't get to pick, but you can make yourself the best man you can be. You didn't choose to have that, to have this mind that you have, but you've chosen to sharpen it. You've chosen to make it the best that you can make it, and everything else around you in the same manner. I'm sure you keep your car clean. I'm sure you like all the things you have. You make them the best they can be. That's all you get, essentially. I think as a man, is to make what's in your life the best you can make it. I'm a big fan of Jack Donovan. He's a great dude.
Yeah, Jack's a great guy. I'm a big fan as well. I disagree with a few things. One of the big things that a really important distinction is that manhood is no longer, let me say that differently. I want to quote him properly to the best of my ability. Masculinity is no longer the requirement that it once was. Once upon a time, without masculinity, you died. Now you can get along pretty well without it. I am not sure I agree with that because I see a ton of people with no masculinity. And it doesn't look to me like they're getting on that well without it. In fact, it looks like life sucks. I know there are parts of our society now who are vehemently opposed to masculinity as a concept. It's all toxic. Yep. The patriarchy is evil. Well, let's judge people by their fruits, right? Let's look at some results, because those people, for the most part, are fucking broke. They look sick.
Yeah.
They are not raising strong families. They're all arguing and usually unhappy and bitter. So why focused on the
negative? They spend their whole lives zeroing in on things that make them unhappy. Man, Simon, I don't know about you, but I don't go over Instagram and find people I don't like just so I can shit talk them. I got more important shit to do. You know what I mean? I look for stuff that inspires me. That's how I found you. That's how I found everybody that I've talked to here. That's why I do what I do. I'm looking for things that lift me up. And I agree with you. The people who are in that camp, it's not a good situation.
And so my fundamental treatise, which is maybe a slight change of direction from I think how Jack looks at it, although I've not discussed it with him. I see masculinity as fucking rocket fuel for success in other areas of your life. It will power up your body. It will power up your sex life and your relationships. It will power up your ability to walk out into the marketplace and make money. And spiritually, entering the spirit world without a gender and without masculinity, you get eaten. The end.
I'm sure that's it. I think about this too, the world that may be a hybrid between the two of you. I mean, think about the advantage your son's going to have with the ideas that you're going to imbue into him, and the competition that he's not going to face. Because I think that there are a few people like us who believe in this idea of masculinity and how important it is, and that it is that rocket fuel you're talking about. And I think that your son's going to he's just going to, because the people around him aren't going to be so focused on that, and he's going to stand out like crazy. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I have days where I really believe we need to fix society, and I have other days where I think, there's no competition. This is awesome. Keep it going. Yeah. But I think I have more. I think I have more of the former, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I do too. And I mean, obviously, that's why I do what I do publicly, and because I want to help. I want to change some shit. I want to make some people have some tools that they didn't get for whatever reason. I want to make get some people thinking about some things that are super unpopular to think about now, but are super necessary. Just like you said, I mean, masculinity is it isn't a thing that can be ignored. It isn't a thing that can be repressed. It isn't a thing that can be, socialized out. I talk a lot about schoolboys and how schools. Anyway, we could go into your homeschooling thing and do a whole new whole show on that. But go ahead, I see you leaning in.
Let me not lose the thread we were on. Right, you asked me about how would a guy without access to mentors and Rite of Passage go about developing his manhood. So and by the way, I make a big distinction between manhood and masculinity. Masculinity to me is an energy, and it's biological, psychological, spiritual energy. Manhood is a framework of obligations and duties and your place within the web of life and how you orientate.
I'm going to make that a clip on TikTok. What you just said,
because I hear it used interchangeably. It is not the same. You can be an evil, destructive motherfucker and be extremely masculine. You can take power and kill and maim and enjoy it and be very masculine. So masculinity does not make you good or bad. Masculinity is completely amoral, whereas manhood typically should have some ethical, moral, or virtuous direction, in my opinion. Important distinction.
I'm going to think about that a lot too, and probably do a podcast on it as well.
Cool. Hey man, we got 2 minutes left. Thing.
Is there anything else you want to chuck in?
So then you gotta look at your values. If you have no male role models around, read books and watch movies with masculine characters. Grab a piece of paper, make a list of what is it in them you admire, what is it in the guys that you hate, that you dislike. Then look at those things and say, okay, what do I have? What do I not have? If I don't have it, I need to develop it. If I do have the thing that pissed me off in that male character, I need to cut it out. And that comes down to awareness. Journaling is one of the most important self-teaching tools available. Every day, writing about your masculinity, your manhood, your virtues, your values, all these things. It can be done in isolation. The last thing you need to do is jump into risk. I have a buddy who just quit his high-paying job to start a company. That's an initiation. That's an initiation.
No
He's cutting himself away from the world he knew. He is killing the man he was. He's in the fire. He needs to reforge and become a new man, and then he's going to return to society successful. It's an initiation. They're available. Just to look at it the right way.
That's awesome. Those are great ideas. Those are great ideas, Simon. That's going to work. You've given me so much. I can't wait to listen back to this and develop more thoughts about what you said. Man, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today, dude. I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
Hey, I'm a selfish motherfucker, and I made some notes. I have one more thing we haven't covered.
Okay,
so
go
you
ahead.
Have to stick around. You have to stick around one more minute, right? This is for the fathers. I was in a store the other day, and I heard this guy going on about how he used to be a sergeant, and he missed making people do push-ups. He missed making people. And can you guess what his arms looked like? Guess who needed to do some fucking push-ups? Him, right? Yeah. So I got thinking about it, and there was a long circuit of my thinking. But here's an important message from me for parents, fathers. Things that we tell our kids, and then there are things that we teach our kids, and then there's the only thing that fucking matters, and that is, what did our kids learn from us?
Yeah, what they see. Yeah,
you can tell them, you can teach them, but guess what? They're going to copy you. So if you're out of shape, you're taking 10 years off your kid's life because they'll be out of shape. You killed 10 years of your kid's life because you're an unshaved motherfucker. Fix it.
Yep. Yeah, it's the truth. I talk about it all the time, that you don't, you do what you see.